Hello and welcome back to another week at our digital Zoom stage door here on Rogers in partnership with the Graham Academy. We have a couple of the students here ready for some Q&A for Sherman Downey. So of course, Sherman has just released a brand new album called New Beautiful. So welcome to the stage door, Sherman.
Thanks for having me, Ian.
It's a treat to have you, and I can't wait to talk a little bit about the new album. It's wonderful to see and have some Sherman Downey music back in our lives again.
I'm
Uh,
excited about it too.
yeah, and so I guess we'll start. We'll go back to the beginning, as I always do in these interviews, because we really focus in on what makes us who we are now. So, what kind of gave the big start for you, Sherman? When was the point you realized, hey, I want to write music and perform it for the rest of my life?
Yeah, well, I mean, some of you might know that I was used to be a high school teacher, and I was up in Goose Bay. Well, first of all, I went to Taiwan to teach after my high school education degree, and I was teaching over there for a while, and that's when I started writing my own songs over in Taiwan. And I was busking a lot on the street, playing cover songs and slipping my originals in just to try them out and get comfortable with them on the street. Nobody was the wiser. And then when I came back to Newfoundland, I went up to Happy Valley Goose Bay, and I was teaching there for a little while, and got a second job working at Mulligan's Pub, slinging booze and like as a barkeep there. And but also they had me play there often, like every weekend, every second weekend or something. And I started playing my originals in that set along with the covers, and it was like from 7 o'clock, I believe, was happy hour, and then you'd end up playing until about 2, 3 in the morning. So lots of covers, but then putting my own music in there as well. And then I had a 5-song demo recorded, and I was slinging it up there. 5 songs, $5. That was the thing. And and I had a bunch packaged throughout there somewhere. But I was home in Newfoundland and Corner Brook here, and playing a gig with Louis McDonald. Everybody knows Louis. And we were just chatting about the demos I had up on, it was MySpace at the time. And he said, "Yeah, I heard a few of the songs you had up there, and maybe you'd be interested in coming in and doing some demos." And so we went in and recorded those a bit more professionally with Lou in the studio in Pasadena. And I ended up passing those along to Music NL and getting a grant to record a full album. And the week previous to going into the studio, I was actually playing a gig with all of the guys in the band, and also Daniel Payne, and we did a St. Patty's Day gig for St. Patrick's Day at Wayland's Gate, and it was a Pogues tribute show. So similar instrumentation to what the band became. And we were in the studio, and Louis and Mike McDonald, who were running the studio, said, "Well, we have two scenarios. We could either do you play everything, and Louis and Mike play all the instrumentation, and that's one way to go. Or if you have a band or anybody you think that would work well on the recording, then maybe you could call them in." And it was just so fresh and exciting, this Pogues tribute thing. And we had all gelled so well together at that show that I got everybody to come in, and we kind of became a band in the studio. And so shortly after that, I just thought, like with Music and L support and the support of the province, and everything seemed to be really good vibes around the whole recording. I figured, well, I'm gonna just retire from teaching now, and and put all my eggs in this basket for a little while. And my rationale at the time was thinking, well, if there's no other money coming in elsewhere, it'll make me work harder to become successful at being a musician. And I haven't gone back to teaching yet, so it's all right.
Yeah, and I think one thing this whole self isolation and quarantine has taught us is that necessity can really push you along. Because I never thought I'd be teaching online and doing all these interviews through Zoom, but here we
Yeah.
are. You are our fifth interview now, so we're really quite into this. We've had Johnny Harris started us off. We had the Once. Camilo the Magician from BC, and Patrina Bromley from Come From Way, and now we're
Wow,
back to singer-songwriter world with you, Sherman. So
that's
it's been a
fantastic.
real
Where are you
treat.
now? You tucked away at home now?
Yeah, I'm here in Corner Brook, and I set up my little studio backdrop. I found some old vinyl and popped them up for today, so I try to change it up every time.
Nice.
So
I'll try to
I'm
get you.
having a great time flexing my creativity. Um,
Fantastic.
yeah, I do have your CDs here actually, Honey for Bees and Sun in Your Eyes, but unfortunately they're not on vinyl, so they don't pop quite as much as
Uh, I'll,
the big sleeve.
I'll try to
Um,
get you some, Ian.
oh, there we go. Right, perfect little plug for me to get some new records.
I know that's what this is all about.
so so Sherman, I guess we'll start by just kind of diving in to you as a creative. You said you started writing some of your own stuff while you were in Taiwan.
Yeah.
So what was the first song that you wrote? I guess that you wrote that you ended up recording would be a little a little better.
Yeah, the first song I would say would be Soul Sweeping, the first track on Honey for Bees. Yeah. So on that 5-song demo that I recorded, I had Soul Sweeping, Indifferences Lay Waiting, Falling Backwards, I believe, Church Mouse, and I can't remember the other one. But yeah,
Hmm.
those were the first bunch.
Yeah, Nate, it's always I love kind of seeing the journey that a group takes like that. Like the Once is another great example. You know,
Yeah.
they've just every album is so kind of different from each other, much like the first two, and then going into to your solo music with this new one. So I guess what is it that inspires you to write a song? Like what does it take to really get you there?
I think sometimes even walking around, I'm always kind of humming something or working toward some other recording. I have a big journal full of notes, even words I like syllabically or each word has a rhythm to it. And so I'm always taking notes and observing things around me, I suppose. Um, and then at the same time I'll have different chord progressions kind of waiting for the right lyric. So i'll uh, I'll have these two things going separately, and then at some point you find yourself comfortable enough, like in your writing area. Typically for me it's downstairs in the basement here, and just the mood strikes to put those things together, and then you find yourself demoing a song and seeing where that takes you.
Hmm. So do you find that the tune comes first and gets its way in, or the story, or sometimes I guess it's a mix of the two?
Yeah, sometimes like the other day I heard something like a rhythm that I really liked, and I was like, oh, I haven't used that rhythm before. And I picked up the phone and just like beatboxed it into the phone basically. So I'm always tapping out rhythms that I like, or melodies I like. I find sometimes when I'm walking, I find that's a good rhythm. I think it's about 120 BPM or so. Like that's what I walk at. And so I always find myself kind of humming along. And then I'm walking down the street whistling into my phone. So sometimes the melodies come quite often first, uh, melodies and rhythm, and then I'll sit down and kind of pick through my lyrics, my notes. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, look at the albums. There's so many stories
yeah,
on them. Church Mouse is a great example because it's really, it could be a book. It just really starts at point A and concludes. It tells
thanks,
such a
man.
clear story.
Thanks.
Um, and then there's some actually, funnily enough, when we were talking with the Once, I believe the song they mentioned was Anna Lee,
Yeah,
which is a sequel to someone else's song, right? Is that kind
yeah.
of the
There was
story? It's kind of a continuation of a story.
Yeah, it's I took the two characters. I don't know. I'm sure everybody's familiar, maybe not, but the song by the band called "The Weight." So take a load off Annie. You know that song. Um, I always love that song. I'm a big fan of the band and their style, and so that song in particular, there's two characters mentioned in the third verse of the song, Luke and Anna Lee, and I thought it would be interesting to see how they ended up working out, And so I just took those two characters and have expanded on their story, and that's what that song is about. Yeah,
Yeah, so it's such a treat to kind of get the glimpse behind the songwriter's
the
inspiration. Like,
madness.
and I guess that's what it is, right? It's sometimes it's a weird idea, like being like, I like those characters, I love that song, I'm gonna take them
Yeah,
and make a sequel to it. It's
yeah.
ours in a
I was talking
workshop.
to yeah, I was talking to Phil Churchill the other day actually, and we were talking about songwriting, and quite often I realize that if I get into a situation in my life where I make a decision to go one way, I'll often wonder what would happen if I went the other way. And so I'll write a song about that character who made the other decision, and how that worked out for that character. Me in another timeline, I suppose.
Yeah, certainly. And sometimes I guess it's the smaller stories that can lead to, like, I remember, I think it was while I was at Templeton, because of course Krista was
Yeah,
working there at the time, and you guys came and played Isadora Duncan,
yeah,
which is super fun, upbeat song about quite a tragic and ironic life
yeah,
of a famous dancer who loved wearing these scarves, and I think her last words were like "onward to glory" or something, and her scarf got caught in the tire of her car, and it ended up, her
yeah,
favorite thing in the world ended up actually killing her.
yeah.
And
I heard
you
there's a
wrote it,
couple of different versions of that story. She
yeah.
said, I think her family says that she said, "I'm off to glory," but other people say she said, "I'm off to love," because she was going to meet a lover of hers that day. So her family kind of wanted to keep that on the
Yeah,
lookout.
leave that one out. But
Yeah.
what, I guess with that song, what is the journey from kind of seeing this story for the first time and then coming up with the song and then deciding it's going to be a super upbeat tune about this kind of tragic life?
I like to be a little bit cheeky when I'm writing. I like to keep things upbeat, and look for the silver lining in that. And that song in particular, we were at a band practice one time, and we were talking about. I say to people all the time, like, sometimes if you're in a band, the best thing you can do at band practice is maybe just sit around and become a band without, like, aside from the music, sit around and become close. And so sometimes at band meetings or band practices, we just found ourselves chatting about whatever was going on. And at this one practice, we started talking about strange ways people passed, uh, died. I don't know why it came up. And Danielle Payne actually mentioned Isadora Duncan, and I hadn't heard of her until that point. Just said how she passed away, and so that's just such an interesting story on how she passed away. And um and that's one of the things I love about songwriting too, just learning new things, because that sent me on a big research. You research the details and find out what she was like, and you learn so much in the research. Yeah, I thought it would be nice to give her a little nod in a happy way, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And building again on songwriting and kind of building the song, then there's kind of the next layer of building an album, because you want your album to work with each other. You want the songs to all
Yeah.
you know work together. So what was that like to then have your songs and then decide, okay, I need 10 that work for this piece, for this
Yeah.
project?
Well, there's something to being in the studio and recording that one project that kind of melds it all together anyway. But there is a lot of thought when you come to thinking about the layout of an album. So, like, for, I believe on both of the albums, well, on the first one certainly. For those of you who know a little bit about theory, the circle of fifths. Um, I don't know. I won't go into
Oh,
describing the circle of fifths.
you can geek out with us. That's all good.
So the circle of fifths is based on different intervals in music. So in the scale, so um, let's say C being the first, and then the fifth from that is the G, and the fifth from that is the D, and the fifth from that is the A. And so I found it's important for me not to be like putting every song on the album in the same key, because then you subconsciously you kind of you start zoning out, and you just start feeling the sameness of every chord, you know. And so it's important for me to make sure that every song is different, um, different chord wise, and that dynamically as well. You don't want to be starting out with too slow a song, let's say, you know. So maybe wait till the third or fourth song to put a little bit of a softer song in. And so yeah, there's a lot of thought. There's definitely a lot of thought going into the layout of an album.
Yeah, for sure. And another kind of trivia kind of question.
Yeah.
Honey for Bees is the title of your first album,
Hmm.
but the track Honey for Bees does not appear
Yeah.
until The Sun in Your Eyes, your second album. So what's the
Yes.
story behind that? It's a title track on an album of a different title.
Yeah, there's a little Easter egg for people who are actually following along with what I'm doing. It's I don't know, hidden tracks don't really exist anymore, do they? And so I thought it would be clever to put the title tracks, or you know, slash hidden tracks on the following album. And I've carried through with that on the latest album, New Beautiful. There's a track called Sun in Your Eyes.
Oh,
And
that's
so I'm currently working on a song called New Beautiful.
well, there you go. Right, it gives you a starting point. Once
Yeah,
you
totally.
once you start doing that, you got to keep it going.
Yeah.
Uh, so let's talk a little bit about New Beautiful. You say, you know, again, we're back to kind of the character-driven pieces, and that it's like going for an adventure and coming back
Yeah.
again, which is a
Yeah.
great way of describing, you know, the journey that we take as artists all the time. We always
Yeah.
stretch, and then we're like, oh, right, right, this is what I really really love to do. So what's it like to be able to go back to that on this new album? And again, this is Sherman Downey. This isn't Sherman Downey in The Ambiguous Case, so it's a bit different in that way as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. For me, what's the question? Sorry.
uh, so what is the process behind this new album? And I guess actually this connects to a question that I received from Violet Cummings.
Oh, okay.
She said, you know, what motivated the new album, and especially since it's kind of that adventuring away and then coming back to the roots again. So what was
Yeah.
it
I
that?
mean, yeah. For me, it was very strange for me to go out and start recording a new album and start writing an album without the band behind me. You know, like for me, it was sitting down in the basement. I've always sat down in the basement, kind of work things out on the guitar or on the piano. But then I had the comfort of going to a band practice and saying to Bill on the accordion, you know, like in, inject yourself into this song, and going to Andrew and saying, banjo, you know, what parts do you think would fit well with this? And so there were so many different things coming into the songs that well, it was just a comfort, you know. But this last album, not having the band there was a very different process. I ended up over in Halifax at Echo Lake with Daniel Ledwell, and like I was playing the piano and the guitar, and he played the electric and the bass, and we had Kinley Dowling come in and play the strings, but and my good friend Alex Porter who played the drums as well. But they're like we're not a band, you know, and
Mm.
so it was a very interesting process for me to be recording in that way, and in many ways like the first album, you know, because I had the songs written and I went into the studio, had all the parts kind of figured out, and then the band we became a band in the studio basically. But for this one it was a bit of a return to that, like just going in alone again. And it's daunting in a way, you know, like a lot of the decisions on this album were made with me and Dan in the studio based on demos that I did in the basement just alone on guitar and keyboard with no input from a band. And so sitting down with a synthesizer and trying to get out horn parts is a very different thing than bringing the song to the band and asking them to add something, you know. So very similar to the first album in that I was very much alone in the process. And yeah, I like it. It's kind of scary for me to be going out with such a, like, this album has pretty big production, with strings and horns and stuff based on those synthy bits that I was
Mhm.
laying down on demos. Um, but I still have to go out and play the songs on acoustic guitar in a lot of situations, because I've really, over the last couple of years, really been getting into the smaller venues, the listening rooms, with just a guitar, and not a band. So yeah, I feel it has come a bit full circle without having a band around me this time.
Yeah, certainly. It's a big difference, even though you do have people backing you up. It's a big difference to have the session band compared to the guys you play with all your live shows, and
Yeah,
you're constantly with. So it
yeah.
is certainly. I'm sure it's quite a difference. And kind of building on that, what are the major differences between doing a live show and recording the album in the studio? It's such a
Yeah,
starkly different environment.
yeah, yeah. The first album, Honey for Bees, I went in and I was talking to Louis McDonald about it, and I really wanted to stay close to what we could present on the stage. And I didn't want to be recording something and then have people expect a certain thing at a live show and not being able to deliver on that. And for the second album, we ended up putting a bit of trombone on there, and but still able to pull it off at a live show. But I've drifted from that idea that the album needs to represent the live show. In fact, I think a lot of people who come to the live show are excited about hearing different versions, and how they work just on acoustic guitar, and they can separate the two things. Like, this last album was huge production. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get out and do a representation of it without, like, I'd love to have 10 people on stage, to be honest. Horn section and a string section would be fantastic. But the reality is, the songs weren't really written that way. And so, um, yeah, I'm okay with the separation of the two nowadays. I'm not really too worried about bringing synthy arpeggiators on stage at the moment.
Yeah. And actually, again, Violet, I'm going to unmute you now so you can ask the question about how songs can change between the studios and live shows. So, Violet, there you are.
Hi.
Hey, Violet, how are you? Great to hear from
I'm
you.
good.
Yay.
I was just wondering, it's funny because right before you said that, I typed this question. Like, how do you choose how to make your song different for when you play it solo or acoustic for a live audience, and make it different from how it sounds on the album, but still enjoyable?
Yeah, I think, well, in the studio, you don't really have anything holding you back. Like, you can dial up any sound you like, or bring in any musician you like, and not worry about not have to worry about someone else's schedule, per se, for like a full tour. And so, bringing in strings was fairly easy in the studio, but not so much to do it live. And so, when I'm put in a situation where I'm doing a live performance just by myself, then I have to work around getting those bits that I like, that I think they're integral to the song, into just an acoustic performance. So maybe I'll do a harmonica or something like that for a horn section, or
Mm.
do a whistle for an accordion line. Um, yeah, I'm not so stressed out about representing the album so much anymore. I
Yeah.
hope the songs stand on their own.
Yeah.
Great
All
to see you,
right.
Violet.
You too.
All right, Violet, thanks for that question. And again, building once more on the differences in performing a song, we're going to go to the topic of music videos and creating those. And you've made some really fun ones. One with Parks Canada,
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun, where you kind of just in blue, you biked through and under a canoe and everything kind of happening around you.
So much. I had
Uh,
just gotten the cast off at that moment, so I was very worried about riding a bike around under a canoe.
Yeah, that one is certainly a treat to watch. And of course, then there's one that really adds a story that's not necessarily right there for listeners in a song. And we actually have one of the stars of that music video watching watching today, Mark Smallwood is is on. So
Hey,
he's
Mark.
rocking
Mark's
out there.
the star of Keep Your Head Up. Yeah, totally.
So, how do those ideas come to life to say, well, one, let's tell a story with this one about a high school reunion, or let's bike around Grossmore Park and duck under things and have some crazy stuff going on in the background.
Yeah, I've been very lucky with those couple of videos. One, like you said, the first one being Parks Canada. Um, they were really looking at trying to get a younger demographic into the park and appeal to a younger demographic, and they thought a music video would be great. And we're local, and the album was just out, so we were approached by them to do that, and that was fantastic. They had an idea of what they wanted to do. They wanted to showcase the area and the things that you could do, like riding bike, and so that we were very keen on getting involved with that for the same reasons they were. And the second one, Peter Buckle actually was looking to stretch his legs and do a video, and we had a partnership on that one. I'm looking. It's a bit different now, isn't it? Like, I can't get together with a group and shoot a video. So currently for the latest album, I've been trying to find animators and videographers who might have some stuff sitting around that could work as a video. It's very, very strange times, isn't it? But yeah, we'll see how the next one works out.
Yeah, I have to either get a full animation or do some kind of art film with all those silent movies and find a story that you can tell.
I'm open to ideas.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. So if anyone in the Q&A has a great music video idea, now's the time to share that. So before we dive into the questions, I have a couple there from you guys watching, Graham Academy students. Keep them coming. But while you're thinking up those questions, Sherman has offered to play a song for us.
Sure.
So now we're going to hear it once he gets up ready and running there. And I'm going to mute myself so we can hear it well. And enjoy this. Sherman will introduce it himself as we navigate the challenges of harmonicas and headphones.
Yeah, sorry.
It's all good.
Let me find a harmonica here. Yeah, so this song is on the new album, and it's actually written about my hometown. I was looking to find something interesting about my hometown. Is Colebrook, Newfoundland, over in Cabra Valley on the west coast of the island. And about 200 people in my town, which I learned today is actually technically not a town, it's a village. So I'm a villager from Colebrook. And so I wanted to do a little bit of research on my hometown, and it's called Colebrook because there's an old coal mine there. And so I thought, okay, well, let's dig into this coal mine. Dig into the coal mine for a story. And what I've discovered was when the town was kind of in its infancy, there were locals living in the area, and some prospectors came into town, and they were looking to set up shop in the mining industry, looking for coal around the area, and they could not find it. They couldn't find it at all. The locals had a suspicion of where this coal could be, but they were kind of keeping tight-lipped about it because they didn't want these prospectors coming in and setting up shop. And one day, a Thomas Downey was walking down the river, and he found this lump of coal at the mouth of a brook, like a brook coming into the river. He found this lump of coal, and he thought, well, maybe if we could go up this brook, we'll find some coal. And sure enough, he went home. He was all excited. He found this coal, but before he had a chance to show any of his friends where he'd found it, he disappeared mysteriously, which is great for songwriting material. And he ended up disappearing, and I think a lot of people probably thought that the local people got rid of him somehow, but in my mind, I imagine he had a lover at home, or a partner at home who didn't like him being gone so much, and so one night she's had enough, and she stomps down to the mouth of this mine, and she decides to kind of blow up the entrance of this mine and seal him in there with his friends to think about what he did, and so this is a song about him. My folks go up there still as a point of interest. They were up there a couple of years back, at this. We go up to this brook and we have a fire or what have you, and they heard a rustling in the woods up across the brook, and so they went up there, and the mine had collapsed in on itself, and sitting in the bottom of this mucky hole was a little baby moose. And so they went down to the house and they got the Argo and a ladder and a jacket, and they came back up and they threw the jacket over the little baby moose, hopped down in the hole and put the straps under the moose, and hauled it up out of there. And I tell you, delicious. Well, this is about Thomas Downey and his situation. Called Deep in the Dark of the Jubilee Sea. Henry took a comfort in the belly of that poor man, with his pickaxe and his shovel by his side. He hardly saw the sun, never spoke to anyone. Anyone could tell he was only a man of flesh and bone. Mary was the daughter of the local tavern. She was born with liquor in her veins, and any man who laid his hands upon was lucky to have used his hands again. And in the middle of the night, deep in the dark, in the candlelight, you can feel the weight of it. There's no way of escape. In the middle of the night, deep in the dark, in the candlelight, how many said it been since he gone? How many years said it been? And how many times did she wait through the night, thinking I'll never do this again? The rumble in the mouth, the canary in the bird, and 100 men knew the feelings had been hurt. Flickering light, all covered in coal, with his pickaxe in his shovel. Then we sat down in the dirt and he was his shovel. Oh, 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 oh. And in the middle of the night, deep in the dark, in the candlelight, you can feel the weight of it. There's no way of escape. In the middle of the night, deep in the dark, in the candlelight, oh, 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 oh. Deep in the dark.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sherman, for that. And of course, Zoom cannot capture music in all its glory. So if you want to hear this, you'll have to buy the album. So how can people get that? How can people get the album, Sherman? I'm guessing digital is most of it right now, certainly.
Yes, it's all over the place on the streaming platforms, whatever you listen to your music, and also I've been the coronavirus and the quarantining has kind of held up the delivery process. They were about 160 albums in the press, and they had to shut down and kind of leave the factory for a little bit. But word is they're sending it. It's going to be here next week, hopefully, the actual physical vinyls and the CDs. But digitally, of course, it's available online, and you can go to the website as well, shermandowney.ca. You can pre-order there, and I'll deliver. I'm wrapping my head around getting deliveries out now this week, and yeah, it's all available there at shermandowney.ca.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you do want a physical copy, that's the way to go, shermandowney.ca. And I guess in this situation, it might be Sherman Downey himself delivering it to your mailbox.
Yeah, locally, I could do that, sure.
So you might have a special treat to be able to
I'm
get
just gonna
that.
get one of those long
Yeah.
things. Meet you at the door.
Well, thank you so much for that song. And again, I love having those stories. I think it's always a treat to hear a story in a song. I've always been a big fan of those songs that kind of tell a full story. And we now have a couple questions, a couple tricky ones. I tell you, this crowd sometimes they go in deep, and I think one of the trickiest ones is coming from a Graham Academy parent.
Okay.
This is Jesse's mom, Diane. So Diane, I'm going to unmute you there so you can ask the question. There we go.
Hi, Sherman.
Hey, Diane,
Just
how are
wondering, I'm not bad. Is there a song? Have you ever heard one of your songs, I guess, on the radio, and thought to yourself, "Why the heck did I write this?" and want to change it?
You know what? Like when you're in the studio and you're recording, it's such a big ordeal to get everything down and just the way you want it on an album. And then once the album is out, it feels like this one, most recent one, New Beautiful. The recording process takes a fair bit of work, and so I rarely go back and listen to an album once it's off the plate. And so I'm like anyone else, when you hear your own self on a recording or see yourself on TV, I'm just like, no, I'm gonna trust that it's okay, and I can't look at it because you'll drive yourself crazy. But yeah, no, I don't do that. I'm very proud to hear anything that anybody wants to play on the radio. So I'm very happy that it's getting played, but it's not like I'm sitting around in the car and turning up the volume and singing along to myself or anything.
You don't go, "That's me, that's me."
Yeah, no, I'm not like the Tiger King driving around in his truck.
Listening to his own music.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Thanks, Diane, for that one. That's a tricky one to start with, but thank you so much.
I love it.
Going in to the opposite end of that, we have a question from Kira. Let me find her. There we go, Kira. Whenever you're ready.
Hey, Kira.
Hi. I just want to know what's your favorite song that you've written, and is it the same song that you like to perform the most, or is there a different song that you'd prefer to perform?
Ooh, great question. That is a good question. I don't think I have any favorite song that I've written. I think once they're written and you start playing them in front of people, that energy that comes back from an audience makes you like that song more. Like, for example, off the first album, like Church Mouse, the one that Ian mentioned earlier, it's just a fun song to play, and feeling the energy that comes back from an audience when you're playing that song in that moment is like, geez, that's my favorite, and I love playing that one as well. So I don't know, that's a tough question. I think each time I write a song, it's my favorite. You know what I mean? Because I'm just happy that it's kind of come together, and in that moment, that's my favorite song. But playing live, I would say Church Mouse is up there. uh, Keep Your Head Up. But I'm saying these off of the first album because I'm very familiar with how people react to them from the stage. My answer is no. I don't have a favorite. Ask some question.
All right. That is a good one and a great
That's a great
answer.
question. Wow, a young journalist here.
Oh, I tell you, these guys they're becoming expert questioners now.
Yeah.
There's lots of different information coming in. And this is another tricky one here. From This one's from Max, and of course we know that you've performed with a lot of different groups, like the Once, filmed by Old Crow magazine out in Grossmourne, part of Grossmourne Summer Music. And along with that, From Stage to Stage, which is a recitation group and a very different show.
Yeah.
And I guess Max is you might make some enemies, but here's Max with his question there. Max.
Hi.
Hey, Max.
Out of everyone you've performed with, who is your favorite?
Oh God. Everyone I've performed with, who's my favorite? Well, I mean, I would have to say that the person I played with most is probably Matthew Byrne. I would say, like, we've become really good friends. He comes from a whole other background, like a traditional artist, and I like that about it as well. Like, we don't have the same backgrounds musically, and so we do this show every year called the Winter Island Tour, where we get together, just the two of us, and we play both of our repertoire. Like, I'll play my songs and he'll join me on my songs, and he'll play his and I'll join him on his. And so I would say, like, I suppose Matthew would be the one I'm most comfortable with, and we've become really good friends as a result. So there's that. Yeah, let's say Matthew.
It makes sense. I mean, you guys work together a lot, and I think it does develop into, having seen that show a couple times. You find a way as a duo to almost kind of merge into a special thing, and that
Yeah.
certainly happens with you guys when
Yeah.
in those shows. It's a neat
Yeah.
thing to watch.
Now, I will say this: I just played the NSO fundraiser in St. John's a couple of months ago now, and that was pretty cool too. Like, a full orchestra behind you. That's one of my favorites too. But I
Yeah.
can't be playing with them every weekend.
Yeah, it's it's tough, but those if we could always have a full orchestra, I mean,
Come on.
who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? Even
Get in the
those
van, everybody.
those big bands do their own. You have all U2 and Elton John doing their shows with a full orchestra. They can only do it, running for 1 week, because it's just so many
Yeah.
people having to get together on their on the schedule. So it's certainly a wonderful thing, but it's not easy. And of course, Sherman, you're connected with the Graham Academy, and a lot of these kids watching through Grossmourne Summer Music's Paul Simon Spectacular, which was directed by Ryan Spencer and Yvette Coleman. So, what was it like to, do not only a full show of covering someone else, but also having to dance, having to kind of act and change costume and character? What
Is
were
that what you call that,
the
dancing?
challenges that you found with that? I guess dancing would be the first challenge.
I love that show. What a great time. And we did 2 years, of course. And yeah, so it was so great getting close to all the kids involved in that, and yeah, that was fantastic. I don't, Paul, I'm a big fan of Paul Simon anyway. I always have been. And so I was pulled to the whole show because of the Paul Simon thing. And then I learned, like, it's such like so much work involved in the show that when we finally were able to perform it, it felt like such an accomplishment too. So that was one of my favorite gigs for sure. Yeah, it was fantastic. Is what it was like.
Yeah, it was a great show too. I got to be backstage the first year as Sherman Downey's dresser. So I got to hold the jacket and have it ready and tie tap shoes on Sherman's feet and push him out there.
I can't dress nearly as quick, nearly as fast without you around, Ian.
There we go, right? That's the challenge. The joy is the magic of theater. A quick change requires many hands to make it look like it was no effort at all. Backstage, it's just
a flurry of activity. Yeah, yeah.
and of course, one of the connections he kind of made is a big fan of yours, and he has a question for you now. And I just want to point out that you guys ended up, I believe, having shirts with each other on them.
Yeah.
So this is Alistair. Alistair has a question for you. Alistair, if you could just unmute yourself on your end there as well. There you go, Alistair. Your question, sir.
So my question for you is, do you have like a song that you're like most proud of, or like the song that you like worked the hardest on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Alistair, how are you, by the way?
Good.
Fantastic. I wear your shirt all the time. I think the last album I definitely worked the hardest on, because the first two albums kind of fit in the same vein, you know, like instrumentation wise and songwriting wise. And so this last album, I really worked hard at kind of developing newer chord progressions for me and playing a lot more piano. So I'm most proud of the songs on this album, I think, currently. And I'm very interested to see how they do. You know, it's a scary thing for me in the studio to be making weird decisions based on what's already been out there for instrumentation and chord structures and stuff like that. And so because of the work that went into the latest album, I'm most proud of this collection, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. So certainly should grab a copy of that album. Again, it's you know, Sherman Downey's most proud of this work.
Yeah.
So now another reason to grab that once it's available. We have a couple more questions. First, I'll just read a few, and then we'll finish off. Lily has a couple questions. So from Phoebe Van Leer and Lindsay Van Leer, big fans of yours. They say Sherman is a deadly storyteller. Deadly, no better word than that. And they're wondering, and of course, with this whole COVID thing, we don't really know what's upcoming. What's the next live performances and anything that you have in the works that's being planned now?
Yeah, well, the album was released on the 17th, and it went out digitally. And as I said, the whole quarantining and everything held up the physical products showing up, but the ball was already rolling for the digital release, so I just kind of let that be. And then on 17th, that was released. And so tomorrow, actually, 9 o'clock our time, I'm going to be playing all the songs on the album and just going through the album and telling stories behind the songs, and I guess play for about an hour, just make my way through the album and on a Facebook live stream. That's what's next. And then concentrating on trying to get some video stuff out there. I've been trying to track down some animation artists, like I say. And so if you know animation or stop motion or anything, get in touch. I'd love to collaborate. I love that there's, it's all very weird times artistically, but I love seeing the collaborations that are happening and the creativity that's coming out of people's seclusion, and so that's what's next, trying to get some video stuff out there, and I guess I'll be trying to do a live stream every once in a while, the first one being tomorrow, and we'll take it from there. There are a lot of people like hosting on their platforms as well. The first one I did was with Home Roots Canada, and I was supposed to go up to northern BC and northern Alberta and into the Yukon and play that tour, but sadly that was postponed until next year, hopefully. And so they hosted a concert on their website. So I think there are a lot of foundations existing for musicians who are kind of like wondering what they can do to help, and they're offering up different streaming platforms and collaborations. So that's all very exciting. It's almost like the Wild West at this point, isn't it? Everybody's trying to fit into this new paradigm, into the new normal, and so or the new beautiful, maybe.
There you go. And I think it's, yes, of course, it's a struggle at this time, but well, when I was talking to Patrina last week, she mentioned, we're actually in the best time for this to happen because we have technology. We can still connect with each other. Where, if this happened 50 years ago, it would be a very, very different story about connecting.
Yep.
You'd have to write letters as the primary,
Oh, God.
and wait a month sometimes. You couldn't even
Yeah.
call across the Atlantic easily, so it's
Yeah.
quite amazing to think the changes that have made this a lot easier. And look at, a lot of artists are out there and continuing to be able to perform their music. So I'm sure that a lot of people will be watching Sunday, 9:00 p.m. I'm guessing, or a.m.
Yep. Oh God,
PM?
no, PM.
So 9 p.m. Newfoundland time. Certainly everybody check that out. There's just so much going on, and we're going to finish off now with a couple questions from Lily Smallwood. All right, Lily, you're unmuted now.
Hey, Lily.
Hi. So my first question for you is, what is your favorite instrument to play?
My favorite instrument to play. Well, I think. Well, I mean, I always play guitar, but I think my favorite might be piano. I don't play enough of it, but I started playing piano when I was in high school. I didn't have there was no music teacher in my school, and so we had like there were no music courses in my school, and so it wasn't until grade 10 that the elementary school in my hometown had a music teacher come in for the elementary students, and so she started giving private lessons, and that's what I started with on piano. And so for me, it's fun to sit down and explore different chord structures and see how these notes fit in. And I'm just more familiar with the piano keyboard than I am the guitar fretboard. So I always gravitate to, when I'm writing, sitting down at the piano. Yeah.
Cool.
How about you?
I don't know. I like them all. I've been playing piano for the longest, so I think I'm
Yeah.
experienced at it. But I also really like playing guitar and ukulele.
Yeah.
So
I don't know how to play ukulele, I'm afraid.
it's much easier than guitar, believe it or not. But
Well, maybe you'll just start doing lessons online, right?
so my second question
Yeah.
is, when you get like discouraged, when you get discouraged or like writer's block, I guess you could say, like, what do you do to kind of help get back into the swing of things, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lily, because after the second, like a lot of people know, like the last album I put out was 7 years ago. And so I did go through a huge writer's block. It was, I couldn't sit down and put anything together. I was still gathering up lyrics in my notes and still kind of playing around with some songs, but it was a different time for me, because I know the third album, there's a kind of a third album pressure, once the first two do well, you want to keep doing well. And so, yeah, I had a crazy writer's block for the longest time. And I think mostly you try to push through it and sit down with the guitar and maybe write as much as you can anyway, like get up and maybe have a dream journal. That was a big thing for me. And then trying to get out and experience new experiences. That's important too. It's important not to kind of like settle into the being discouraged with writer's block and just kind of letting it happen. You almost have to get up and try to experience new things to inspire new ideas. Yeah. Tough though. Writer's block is tough.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Great to see you.
Great to see you too.
All right, thank you very much, Lily, for that. And of course, Lily playing ukulele has the best name for a cover artist or original artist on ukulele because it's ukulele, and that's awesome.
Great.
Yeah,
Make it happen. Yeah.
Joel commented that there in the chat, and that's that was yeah. So it's a fantastic name for a group, for a headliner, you know.
Yeah,
ukulele and the something.
I love it.
So Sherman, thank you so much for coming on, sharing some music and sharing some wonderful stories and some insight onto what creates a song for you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Great questions. I'm very happy to be here, be a part of it. Thanks.
All right, so everyone, we will be back again next weekend with someone new to talk about some in-depth look. And as we finish up, let's all say goodbye, and we'll see you again at the Stage Door on Zoom. All right, see you, everybody. Thank